She was invited to her ex-husband's wedding just to be laughed at. But when she began to sing, the entire room fell silent. And a secret buried for 20 years suddenly came to light. This isn't just a story about old love. It's the journey of a woman reclaiming her name through music. If you've ever given up something for someone else, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel to hear more unforgettable stories. Evelyn spotted the envelope lying atop the usual stack of junk mail, but this one stood out. Heavy, elegant cardstock in a soft ivory tone, its corners gently rounded. She knew immediately it wasn't a utility bill or a supermarket coupon flyer. She picked it up, flipped it over. She didn't need to open it to guess what was inside. Some things, you can tell just by the paper and the print, already speak volumes. And just as she suspected, the finely italicized words appeared once she opened the envelope. You are cordially invited, Miss Evelyn Moore, to the wedding of Thomas Carter and Isabel Green on April 14th at the Rosewood Hotel. Evelyn let out a dry laugh, the kind of laugh only people who've weathered their share of storms ever really learn. Thomas, the man she once loved, once married. The man she'd left her dream of the stage for, to follow him to Boston, to open a small law practice, to build a simple family life. The man who once said, "You sing beautifully, Evelyn, but being my wife takes more than that." 15 years. A modest house with a red brick fireplace. Dinners with no music, no stage lights, no applause. Only the soft clink of spoons against bowls and stories of uneventful days. Evelyn had once believed she made the right choice, until he started being away too often. Then Isabel appeared. And Evelyn, the woman who had once turned down her first record deal to build a home with Thomas, was quietly dismissed with nothing more than a cold, clean divorce. Evelyn sat down by the window, letting the late afternoon sunlight slip across the sleeve of her worn cardigan. She reread the invitation, this time noticing the small note at the bottom. It would be wonderful if you could share a musical performance, a beautiful memory for us all. Sister, a beautiful memory. Evelyn sat still. They hadn't invited her out of gratitude. They invited her to be a prop, a relic of the past, meant to make their present shine brighter. A contrast, a quiet insult wrapped in gold-trimmed ribbon. She could have thrown the invitation in the trash. She could have stayed silent or sent back something bitter. Instead, Evelyn stood, poured herself a cup of tea, and opened her old songbook. If they want to hear me sing, she whispered to no one in particular, then I'll sing. But not for them. It was a promise to herself, or maybe to the note still sleeping somewhere inside her. On the afternoon of April 14th, Boston shimmered in a soft sunlight, like a bridal veil draped gently over the city's shoulders. Evelyn stood before the mirror one last time, adjusting the delicate treble clef pendant around her neck. Her dress was a simple shade of dusky blue, nothing flashy but refined. She wore no heavy makeup, just a hint of dried rose lipstick and a spritz of the vintage perfume she once used while singing in smoky jazz bars. As she stepped out of the car in front of the Rosewood Hotel, Evelyn drew in a slow, steady breath. From the grand lobby drifted the sound of a gentle waltz, clinking glasses, and the cheerful hum of a world she once belonged to, but now approached only as a guest on the fringes. The MC greeted her with a polite smile as she entered the hall. No one recognized her right away. Evelyn felt like a shadow gliding past satin ribbons, bouquets, and toasts. She passed the cake table and found her name on a small place card, tucked away at a far table near the band. She sat quietly, turning her glass between her fingers. No one came to speak with her. Around her, people chatted about Thomas's thriving law firm, about Isabel's dress being an exact replica of one worn by a Hollywood actress, about how this wedding is truly next level. Then the MC took the stage, clapping to gather attention. Isabel rose, resting a gentle hand on Thomas's arm. Her eyes gleamed with the kind of glow that held just a hint of triumph. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate with us," Isabel began, her voice thick with syrupy charm. "And how incredibly special it is to have Evelyn Moore with us today, once a talented singer and an old friend of the groom." A few eyes turned toward Evelyn. Some nodded politely, some offered faint smiles, others stared as if seeing a character from a half-forgotten story. Isabel continued, her smile slicing soft and sharp at once. Evelyn once turned down a full European tour, all for love. Such a romantic sacrifice, wouldn't you say? A few polite chuckles rippled through the room. Evelyn looked up. Not angry, not flustered, just calm, quiet. The kind of quiet found at the eye of a storm, untouched, unmoved. The MC leaned in with a gentle prompt. Miss Evelyn, would you perhaps share a song with us? As a lovely memory? Evelyn rose. Her steps were neither rushed nor hesitant. She walked to the microphone, where a soft pool of light awaited, and in that brief moment, the entire room fell into silence. Because the woman standing there was no longer the ex-wife or the has-been singer. She was someone about to speak, from the deepest part of her soul. When the MC said the name Evelyn Moore, a few heads turned. Eyes widened, not in shock, but in curiosity. Then Isabel stepped onto the stage, champagne glass in hand, her face glowing under the lights, though the curve of her lips hinted at a smirk more than a smile. We're so lucky today, she said, her voice exaggerated like a reality show host. Among our guests is someone who used to be a singer, almost famous. Soft laughter rose from a few tables. She was invited on a European tour, wasn't she? Isabel glanced quickly at Thomas, who managed a tight smile and looked away. But for love, she chose the quiet life over the spotlight, a truly romantic decision. This time, the laughter was louder. Someone whistled. A middle-aged man leaned toward his wife and whispered, Bet she sings lullabies to her cats now. Dear Evelyn, Isabel said, her smile frozen in place. We'd love to hear you sing. Just one song, as a blessing. Or maybe a little comeback performance. A sharp cut wrapped in velvet. Evelyn stood. She knew exactly what this was, a spectacle, a sideshow, something for the crowd to whisper about over dessert. But she didn't flinch. She walked toward the stage. The soft, steady tap of her heels on the floor echoed like a heartbeat undisturbed by the storm ahead. There were murmurs, she still sings? That dress? Definitely dated. Who lets sad songs happen at a wedding? She took the mic, quietly. In that moment, every sneer, every snide comment seemed to hang in the air, waiting for her to crack, to falter, to get angry, to flee. But Evelyn simply turned to the band. Key of C, ballad tempo, let me lead. The piano began. No synths, no thundering drums, just soft, steady notes falling like rain over still water. Evelyn started to sing, not with the voice of someone broken, but of someone who had walked through fire and come out whole. You laughed before I even sang, thought I'd break, thought I'd hang. But here I am, voice and spine, and every note is truly mine. The room fell silent. No more whispers, no more smirks. Just that voice, note after note, stretching across the hearts of those who'd once scoffed. Evelyn finished the song. She wasn't proving anything. She wasn't asking for what was lost. She simply sang, because now, at last, her voice belonged wholly to herself again. As the final note faded, Evelyn gently set the microphone down. She didn't bow. She didn't scan the room. She just stood there, one brief second, to hold on to the warmth of the moment. Then she turned and walked away. No applause came immediately. Not because the song had failed, but because no one was ready. They were still seated, still stunned, like something unnamed had just been touched inside them. The silence was first broken not by the MC, nor the band, but by a middle-aged woman seated near the stage. She quietly dabbed at the corner of her eye, then began to clap, slow, deliberate, certain. The sound spread. A few others stood. The applause wasn't thunderous, it wasn't perfectly timed, but it was real, like each clap was an apology for every condescending glance that had come before. Evelyn didn't look back. She walked straight toward the exit, heart hollow, but strangely light. For the first time in years, she had sung for no one but herself. Not for Thomas, not to keep face, not to grasp at what was lost. She had sung to prove to herself that the voice, the dream lived. And for her, that was enough. Behind her, she heard footsteps approaching. Not hurried, calm, deliberate. A man in his 50s, tall with neatly cropped salt and pepper hair, wearing a tailored suit that didn't shout wealth but whispered it with quiet confidence. He smiled at her as if they were old friends meeting again after many years. Miss Evelyn Moore? He extended a hand. Arthur Hale. I didn't think I'd hear that voice again, especially in a place like this. Evelyn furrowed her brow slightly. She didn't recognize him. Arthur explained. He used to be a music producer before moving into media investments. Back in 2004, he'd come across an unreleased demo, a jazz ballad called Autumn Knows, sung by a woman whose voice he never forgot. He'd kept that recording for 20 years. That voice, he said, stayed with me, and today I heard it again, not just as sound, but as a life story. Evelyn was surprised, but said nothing. Arthur continued gently, I won't ask why you stopped, but if you're willing to begin again, I'd like to fund a full album, not for fame, just because I believe that voice still deserves to be heard. Evelyn looked at him, no suspicion, no quick refusal, no rushed acceptance. Just something stirred in her expression. Not ambition, not revenge, but a quiet flame, one she thought had long gone out. Evelyn couldn't quite recall how she'd left the Rosewood Hotel. All she knew was that, when she opened the door to her small apartment, the familiar air greeted her. Carrying the scent of old wood, a trace of Earl Grey still lingering in the teapot, and the warm yellow glow spilling over the well-worn piano keys. She slipped off her shoes, sat on the old couch, and reached for the music notebook that had sat untouched for years, its only recent purpose to hold her morning coffee cup. The handwritten notes were still there, the slanted strokes of her younger self, with a small line scribbled in the top left corner. Finished at 2 a.m., still in love. Evelyn closed her eyes. Arthur's offer echoed in her mind like a refrain unresolved. I'm willing to fund it all. An album. Your sound, your terms, no strings. Not out of pity, because music needs voices like yours. No one had said anything like that to her in 20 years. Not even Thomas, the man who once claimed to love her voice, had treated it as essential. To him, it was always a charming extra, something to put back in the box when it was time to build a stable life. She stood, poured herself a glass of red wine, and sat before the piano. Her fingers touched the keys. The sound was soft, dry, a little off-pitch, but still there, like an old friend who'd never truly left. Evelyn wasn't drunk, but her heart stirred, as if someone had just tapped a long-buried vein deep within the earth. The next morning, when Arthur called back, she didn't answer right away. She let it ring 3 times, then picked up, her voice steadier than she expected. Are you sure? She asked. More sure than any deal I've ever signed, Arthur replied. But the decision is yours. This album, she said slowly, won't sound like what the market wants right now. Good, he chuckled. I'm not chasing the market. I'm chasing truth. There was a pause. Then Evelyn murmured, I need time. You have it, Arthur said without hesitation. Just don't take too long. That voice of yours doesn't deserve to sleep through another decade. After the call, Evelyn walked through the small park near her home. Spring wind played through the trees, teasing out tiny new leaves. Children laughed in the distance. An elderly woman read on a bench. A young man strummed a guitar quietly. She listened to it all, and suddenly understood. Life always carries an undercurrent of music. The question was, did she still have the courage to add her own harmony? Evelyn smiled, just a little. For the first time in years, she didn't ask herself if she was still young enough, or if anyone still cared. She only asked, do I still have something to sing? And the answer was, yes. The first recording session didn't go as smoothly as Evelyn had hoped. She was used to singing under dim lights, with a live piano, in the warm haze of old red wine at tiny jazz bars. But the studio was cold and clinical, like an operating room. Every breath was caught by the mic. Every missed beat lit up on the screen like a red mark on a test result. The sound engineer, Max, mid-30s, black-rimmed glasses, quiet demeanor, was the most patient person on the team. While others busied themselves with cables, notes, or schedule updates, Max simply listened. To every scratch take, every mic test. He didn't say much. That afternoon, while everyone else took a break, Max stayed behind. He browsed through some of the older files Evelyn had sent. Scratch recordings, unnamed demos, pieces she probably thought of as nothing more than old keepsakes. One audio clip made him freeze. The file was simply labeled Autumn, EM 2004. A younger-sounding Evelyn sang a soft ballad, and the chorus began with, If you go, I won't ask why. I'll just wait for autumn to lie. Max sat up straight. That lyric, he'd heard it before. Not in Evelyn's recordings, but in a famous song from a few years back. A hit called Autumn Lies that had won Most Emotional Song of the Year, performed by a rising young artist. He checked the copyright records. The song had been registered in 2010. The listed copyright holder, Thomas Carter. Max stared at the screen, sweat gathering at his temples. He double-checked the metadata on Evelyn's file. Created, 2004. A handwritten note embedded in the file read, "Wrote this last night. Maybe it's a bit sentimental, but it's real." He wasn't a lawyer, but he knew this wasn't a coincidence. When Evelyn returned to the studio, Max was still at his seat. He hesitantly held up his headphones and asked, "Miss Evelyn, did you write this song? When was it from?" Evelyn looked at him, then slowly sat down. 2004. I wrote it in one night after I turned down a tour to stay with Thomas. Max bit his lip. He wasn't sure how to say it, but finally managed. "This song, it's nearly identical to a track that became really famous, but the registered writer is Thomas Carter." Evelyn froze. For the first time in years, she felt a note inside her being crushed. Not because it was wrong, but because someone had taken it from her heart, edited it, and stamped their own name on it. She asked softly, voice dry, "Are you sure?" Max nodded. And in that fleeting moment, Evelyn understood. This comeback wasn't just about an album. It was going to be a journey to restore the truth and reclaim the voice she had once surrendered in the name of love. Evelyn sat alone in her small apartment, the soft yellow kitchen light casting a faint glow on the untouched glass of wine in front of her. On the table lay a printed document. Max had sent it after digging through the National Registry System. The official copyright record for the song Autumn Lies. Songwriter, Thomas Carter. Registration year, 2010. Note, composed by Thomas Carter in the aftermath of his divorce, inspired by grief, loss, and personal growth. Evelyn let out a laugh, not out of amusement, but from the bitter irony of being turned into someone else's version of her own pain. She remembered that night clearly, crying as she scribbled the lyrics down at 1 a.m., while Thomas stumbled in after a networking meeting that lasted past midnight. She wrote the song not to release it, not for acclaim, but to keep herself from falling apart. She could still hear his voice back then. "You wrote this? Or should I help clean up a few lines so it actually sounds good?" She hadn't minded. She handed him the rough draft, thinking it was just something shared between husband and wife. She never imagined that would be the last time the song truly belonged to her. The next morning, Evelyn met Arthur Hale at their usual cafe. Her face showed no anger, no sorrow, only a quiet resolve, like someone who had just walked out of a long dream. "Arthur," she said, placing a printed document on the table, "do you know anyone in copyright law?" Arthur glanced over the papers. His expression darkened. "You wrote this song? Both lyrics and melody. Do you have proof? A recording from 2004, and a notebook I've kept, date and time, all written down." Arthur paused for a few seconds, then asked quietly, "Do you want to sue?" Evelyn looked out the window, where the morning sun lit the silver hair of an old woman walking her dog. She shook her head. "No, I don't want to sue, but I do want to sing it, with the real name, with the real feeling, and I want people to know who truly wrote it." Arthur nodded, eyes filled with respect. "Then we'll start there. But you need to be ready, Evelyn. Once you speak up, there's no stepping back." Evelyn gave a soft smile. "You know what? I've spent a lifetime stepping back so others could move forward. This is the first time I'm choosing to stay still, to reclaim who I am." That night, Evelyn opened her old notebook, her fingers slightly trembling. On the very first page, in faded violet ink, the words stared back at her. "Don't let this song live only in your head. Sing it, if one day you're brave enough to stop staying silent." She nodded gently. That day was now. Evelyn didn't give any warning. She simply sent a brief message. "Can we meet?" About the 2004 song. Less than 3 minutes later, Thomas called. His voice trembled slightly, though he tried to sound composed. "You mean Autumn Lies?" "No," Evelyn replied. "I mean Autumn, EM 2004. Do you remember?" They agreed to meet Thursday afternoon at a quiet cafe tucked into a corner street where no one would recognize them. Evelyn arrived early. She wasn't wearing a dress, nor did she put on elaborate makeup. She came as herself, simple, composed, and clear-eyed. Thomas showed up later, still as well-groomed as ever. But instead of the familiar greeting hug, he simply nodded. The air between them wasn't heavy with old feelings, but with truths that had never been properly named. Evelyn placed a small USB and a single printed page in front of him. My original 2004 recording. The opening line, the chorus, the chord progression, note for note. I never signed over the rights. I was never credited. Thomas looked down at the paper, lips pressed tight. Back then, I didn't think you'd ever sing again. You'd given it up. You didn't need any of this anymore. Evelyn didn't blink. You don't get to decide the fate of my dreams, and you definitely don't get to sell them. Thomas sighed, leaning back in his seat. The firm was in debt. I thought it was just a song, and you never said you were going to release it. That's exactly why you were wrong, Evelyn said, voice steady. Because to you, it was just a song. But to me, it was the last time I wrote down who I really was. Silence hung between them like a melody missing its final note. Finally, Evelyn leaned forward, eyes meeting his without flinching. I'm not suing. I'm not asking for an apology. I came here to say this. I'm going to sing that song again, with my name on it, in public, and if anyone asks, I'll tell them the truth. Thomas nodded, slowly, perhaps for the first time realizing he no longer held the script, no longer had the privilege of explaining things to keep the image tidy. You've changed, he murmured. No, Evelyn replied. I've just come back, to where I was always meant to be. She stood, more at ease than when she arrived. As she stepped through the door, the evening breeze lifted the edge of her coat, and the fading sunlight stretched long down the street. Evelyn walked away without looking back. For the first time in years, there was no music between them, only the truth and a silence too full to hide behind anymore. Arthur proposed a simple live stream. No flashy TV coverage, no glittery host, no elaborate backdrop. Just a warm recording room, a piano, and a woman telling a story millions have quietly lived through, having a dream taken from you, then learning how to reclaim it, using nothing but your own voice. Evelyn agreed. The live stream was titled The Song That Was Never Mine. Arthur sent a brief press release to a few independent music channels. Evelyn shared the link on her personal page with a single line. I used to be silent. Now I choose to sing. No one expected the response. Within 2 hours of going live, thousands had shared it. The viewers weren't just music fans. They were people who had been overlooked, who had stepped aside so others could shine, who once told themselves, it's fine, it doesn't really matter. And then, at exactly 8 p.m. on Saturday, under the soft light falling across the piano, Evelyn appeared. She wore a charcoal gray turtleneck sweater, her hair neatly tied back, no jewelry, no bold lipstick. But her eyes, they burned gently, like a flame newly lit, calm but unwavering. Without preamble, she sat down and began to speak. In 2004, I wrote a song after turning down a European tour to stay with my husband. I thought love was enough to make me forget music, but no, I only forgot myself. She went on, brief, clear, telling how that song was later registered under someone else's name, how she stayed silent, and how, finally, she chose to speak. No tears, just a steady voice, as if each word had been carved from fingers already worn raw. Then Evelyn placed her hands on the piano, took a long breath. This is the original, with its real lyrics, under its real name. The melody began. No bitterness, no blame, just something like mist. So light you didn't realize you were crying until your hands were wet. If you go, I won't ask why. I'll just wait for autumn to lie. But here I am, still breathing through. The song that once belonged to you. The chat flooded with comments. My heart aches. She's singing for millions of us. First time a song ever felt like healing. That very night, the clip was shared across every platform. Music bloggers, critics, even copyright lawyers started asking, who's the real songwriter? Evelyn Moore's name appeared in headlines, not as the ex-wife of a famous attorney, but as the woman who redefined silence with her song. 1 week after the live stream, Evelyn's small apartment overflowed with flowers. Not from fans, but from strangers. Each bouquet arrived with just a few handwritten words. Thank you for saying what I never could. She read every letter slowly, as if listening to the sound of 1,000 hearts that had been silent for far too long. The press stopped asking about the copyright scandal. Evelyn didn't pursue legal action. She didn't need to. She had reclaimed something more valuable than fame or royalties, herself. Her debut album, I'm Still Here, was released independently without flashy promotion. Yet in just 1 week, nearly 100,000 digital copies were downloaded. There were no glossy music videos, just raw recordings, a real voice, real emotion. And that's what made people fall silent when they listened. Arthur suggested organizing a small city tour. Evelyn declined. She didn't want to return to the old rhythm, Stages, backstage chaos, spotlights, and applause that didn't know her name. She chose something simpler. One quiet Sunday, at a small community center in the suburbs, Evelyn hosted her first music and storytelling session titled Rewriting the Dream. The attendees weren't artists. They had no business cards or contracts. They were middle-aged women, women who once scribbled poetry in secret notebooks, who once had beautiful voices but were told to get a real job, who once dreamed but never dared to speak it aloud. Evelyn sat among them, no microphone, no stage. She simply asked, "When was the last time you did something just because you loved it?" The room fell silent. Then, one hand slowly rose, then two, then three. They didn't know how to write music. They couldn't sing in perfect pitch. But they knew what it was like to hold a dream in your chest like an unfinished breath. And somehow, Evelyn had made them believe. It's not too late. One late afternoon, Evelyn sat alone in the old studio, her fingers brushing gently across the piano keys. On the bookshelf, beside a cup of cold tea, was an unopened envelope from a major record label, offering 6 figures to buy the rights to I'm Still Here. She smiled faintly, tore it open, and set it aside. A new song was forming in her mind. Not for the market, not for fame. Just a song, taking shape from old shards, like green shoots pushing through abandoned soil. Evelyn closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This isn't the final note. It's the opening line. To a life I'm writing in my own true voice.